Okay, Rome Unit, Section 5, the Roman Army. What do you need to know about the Roman Army? Well, how was it organized? How were they equipped? How did they train? And what was their function within the Roman Republican Empire to spread Roman culture? Once you understand these, it kind of is going to make sense when we go through the history timeline and a little bit about how the Roman Republic rose, died, and was replaced by an empire, and some of the problems that were endemic. The things that we've already dealt with in terms of dignitas and odium, well, the Roman army is going to play a bit of a role here too. So let's understand this complex institution and in its role in making Rome the most powerful civilization in the ancient world. Okay, the main part of the army was a legion, and that was 5,000 men, and it was under the command of a legate. The legates were patricians, usually senators, and these guys would go ahead gain dignitas, glory, and wealth from their campaigns. The legion was divided into 10 cohorts of about 480 each. Each cohort was made up of 6 centuries, and the century was commanded by a guy named centurion. Centuries originally had 100 men, maybe a little bit less, depending upon what time in Roman history. Centurions were very important. They were responsible for training the soldiers under their command and making sure everyone obeyed the orders. Some were very cruel, but these were the hardcore professionals, essentially the non-commissioned officers within the army. Standard bearers. Well, each one had his own emblem. They were carried by the bearer, very experienced and trusted soldiers. It was an honor to be the standard bearer, and to lose your standard was a great disgrace. How do you become a legionary? Well, you had to be a Roman citizen at first, although that was going to change. You had to be physically fit and at least 1.6 meters tall. Roman soldiers were a little bit shorter than what we would call the norm today. You were expected to stay in the army for 25 years if you joined. Once an area was conquered or became allied with the Romans and incorporated into the empire, non-citizens could go ahead and join, and one of the outcomes would be you'd be able to gain your citizenship. Most of the soldiers that joined were between 18 and 20 years old. Their training was tough. 3 18-mile marches every month. Each march, the legionary would carry 50 pounds of equipment. We'll talk about some of their combat equipment, but they had other things. They all carried shovels. Roman legions, unlike other armies, did their own engineering, and they were great engineers. How were the legionnaires equipped? Well, first of all, they had to buy all their equipment. This was not cheap, but it came out in deductions from their pay, and they were able to purchase what they needed. The Roman sword was a gladius. It was a pretty short sword, between 24, 27 inches long on the blade, and then you had the handle, so maybe 30, 32 inches long. It was designed for the in-close fight, and as you can see, it was a stabbing weapon and a slashing weapon. For longer distance, each Roman legionary carried 2 spears called a pilum, and they would be affixed inside their shield, and then they would be able to use those. They were between 2 and 5 pounds each, and they were designed, if you take a look at that design here, it's got a long metal shaft, which was fairly soft, and when they threw it, it was designed so that it would bend, so that as they threw it, the enemy couldn't pick it back up and effectively use it to throw back at the Romans. For protection, Romans were issued a body armor and a helmet. Now, sometimes this was the steel plate that you see here in the picture, and the Roman helmet, you could see, gave them pretty good visibility, gave them protection down along the cheekbones, and protected their head. They also had leather armor that they would wear depending upon the time of the Roman period, which Roman period. Late in the empire, as they brought in more and more Germanic tribes, less and less armor was worn. and the discipline started to fall apart. But a Roman going into combat had some significant protections. They also had, for every legionary, a shield called the scutum. The scutum was protection almost from head to toe, and it would help them form a shield wall. Unlike the round shields that the Greeks used, these were much bigger. They weren't used so much as a weapon, but they did provide more protection. In order to get to close combat, they'd form a shield wall called a testudo, or a tortoise, and it would protect them from arrows as they closed in so they could use their gladius, which was the main weapon. They learned drill and marching, and it was important so that they could go ahead and form their battle lines and be able to maneuver on the battlefield and gain the advantage. New recruits were given shields and swords that were twice as heavy as the real thing to get them ready for combat. It wasn't just the Roman legion. The legion had auxiliaries, and these soldiers were from lands conquered by the Romans, and the Romans were smart. They used the talents and the specialties of the people that they conquered as well. Auxiliaries provided the specialists like cavalry, archers, artillery, soldiers, peltists, guys who would use slings. Whatever their specialization was, they would organize them into units that would serve alongside. Auxiliaries were thought as second-class soldiers. They were paid less, and their loyalties were sometimes questioned. They were not trained quite as rigorously, although they certainly were trained hard when they were on campaign with the legion. And after 25 years, they also would become citizens, and so would their children. So this is going to play into the role of the Roman army in spreading Roman culture as well. On retirement, Roman soldiers, they were given a pension of about 13 years' worth of pay, and they're granted land and suitable animals for a small farm in one of the conquered provinces. They were exempt from having to pay the taxes. Okay? Injured soldiers, they didn't get a retirement because if they were hurt in battle, also would receive benefits, would be exempt from taxes, and usually the Romans would place somebody loyal in the civil service that would administer one of the provinces or colonies. Roman soldiers served 20 years of active duty, and then the last 5 they were put in administrative duties. As you get older, your body can't do all the stuff that you could do when you're 18 or 20. Trust me on this. So how did they spread the Roman culture? Well, Roman soldiers from all the provinces learned the language and the values from Rome. When they retired, they get appointed as low-level government officials in many cases. So you've got loyalty built in to the structure, and these are the people that end up retiring in the area that they came from. They spread the culture that they had picked up while they were in the legion. And because they spoke the language, it was a way of expanding the influence of Rome throughout their conquered territories. So in summary, the Roman army was a dominant force. One of the things about the Roman army when you see them is that if you defeat the Roman army, you know they're coming back. So they are single-minded of purpose. This is part of that dignitas and saving face that had to happen. They're very well equipped and very well trained. Roman legions were supplemented by auxiliaries who fought for Rome, usually in specialist arms. The Roman army was an institution that spread Roman values and culture throughout the empire.